This has been said by many other photographers in history, and it will continue to be said, but your camera is a passport. And other than the pictures themselves, I think the thing that is most powerful and what I enjoy the most about photography is your ability to see into and experience other people's lives. It's a phenomenal mode of connection. It's a phenomenal tool to travel. And ultimately, it shows that photography is a humanist pursuit. It's all about people. It's about understanding people's joys, their pain, their suffering, their beauty. And it's a beautiful way to experience the world. As a photographer, you always need to keep in mind the fundamental elements of a picture, which are light, time, composition, and context. And in that sense, it's quite a simple art, but it's also complex in the sense that no moment is ever repeated. But really, once you have the fundamentals down in terms of how you're going to identify a moment, how you can moderate and modify exposure and composition, these are the primary elements that go into taking a compelling photograph. It's as complex as it sounds simple. Within the news context specifically, obviously there are a few more elements that come into play that make an image compelling. And there you're specifically looking at context and trying to represent an aspect of humanity that people can empathize or relate with. So you're trying to represent that moment or that circumstance in a single picture maybe, or in a few pictures, where you're representing it very accurately. And you're also able to allow the viewer to share in that human experience. You still need to train as a photographer, but there are many more opportunities that are available to do so in today's day and age than there ever have been before. And there are advantages to both, to some kind of formal training and also to being self-taught. Some people might disagree with me on this, but the fundamentals of how the technical aspects of photography work in terms of how a camera operates is really something that you can learn in a day. It'll take a lot longer and a lot more experience to become familiar with it, but in terms of the technical aspect, photography is not that complicated. Really, the difficulty is in understanding how to represent something that you might visualize in your mind and get that on a camera from the scene that you're photographing itself. I have a story to tell which illustrated how important planning and self-care is for pictures. Last year I went up with a colleague to cover the Zimbabwe elections, and we went through with less planning than we should have and not much of a budget, and that meant that we were underfed, under-rested, and even though we shot good pictures, we were really only operating at 80% efficiency. And that's not a place that you want to find yourself in, especially when the pictures or the story that you're telling are important. Something that I've learned that's fundamental to making good images is really planning. And it's something that comes through whether you're doing corporate work or commercial work or whether you're doing news photography. It's really the same. And there are a lot of elements to that. Some of them are as basic as making sure that all your batteries are charged and your cables are all together and your gear is well looked after and serviced and all the rest. But a lot of it comes into whether you've made, for example, a shot list, whether you've pre-visualized the events or whatever it is that you're shooting, the news scene, and even though you're going to probably end up working off whatever you've planned, having some kind of plan and pre-visualization is really fundamental, I think, into creating strong images and creating your own images. Finding your own style is really important and quite difficult to do. Because of the proliferation of images every day that we see on social media all over the place, it can be difficult to find your own voice. It's important to study fundamentals, to understand the history of photography in terms of its language, the different languages that exist in it, and then find your own way to speak. And I think that this is something that is probably one of the biggest obstacles to most photographers, myself included. It's easy to be captivated by the images of others to the point where you solely imitate them and find it difficult to produce your own work. One of the ways that I found that you can do that is by having good and fair critique from photographers you respect on a constant basis, and not just your best pictures, but your whole take, everything that you shot from something, so they can see how you visualize even when you get it wrong. One of the other ways, ironically enough, is to not worry too much about critique. When you're shooting things that aren't related to your career in terms of financials, when you're not shooting for clients, when you're shooting for yourself, it's the time that it's easiest to hear your own voice in pictures. So one of the most important things about storytelling is being able to immerse your viewer, and that's a very challenging or uniquely challenging thing to do. And all of the technical elements of photography come into that, your light, your time, your moments. But I think it's also a representation of every photographer who is taking a picture. You're shooting as much the exterior as you are from your own view. And if you are touched by a particular moment, if you are emotional or connected to your subject and the moment that you're photographing, your eye will follow that same train, and it will represent a story and a connection to your pictures itself. It's important to have the fundamentals down and know the technical, but I think it's equally important to trust your instincts about what a moment is.